And so I wanted to do a series on relationships over the next 4 weeks where we're going to look at 4 kind of independent topics around relationships, but they're all connected by kind of a common theme here. And the reason that I think this is so important for you and it's so important for us is that we are designed for 2 relationships. We're created for 2 of them. We're created for a relationship with God, and then we're created for a relationship with each other. This is in our DNA. It's whether you're introverted or extroverted. Who's an extrovert? Yeah, you got some extroverts. See, I didn't ask the introverts to raise their hands because they would have never come back. They'd be like, that guy asked me to pray. What? No, I don't do this. I don't do this in public. Whether you're an introvert or you're an extrovert, I'm an extreme introvert, believe it or not. You think that, I'm an extreme introvert. And whether you're introverted or extroverted, you need relationships. You were made to have a relationship with God, and you were made to have a relationship with each other. But we're up against an obstacle or like a problem here. And as I was doing research for this message and trying to figure out where do I want this to go, what do I want to involve in this thing here, I came across something that made a lot of sense to me, but I haven't really heard of before. And this thing it's called the modern friendship recession. And so if you don't know what a recession is, all our finance bros probably do, but the modern friendship recession is anything that's on a decline. So in finance, I think it's 2 quarters in a row, the economy's on a decline. There's no positive growth, there's negative growth. And so with this modern friendship recession is what's happening with us is that our relationships are on decline. Our friendships are on decline. So we just simply don't have as many good friends as we did or people did in the past. And there's a whole bunch of factors behind that. But what's interesting to me is in a society in a culture where it's easier to be connected to more people than ever, right? We have followers. We can jump into accounts. The number of people that follow our family Instagram account, lad.family or ladfam, whatever it is. Yeah, that one. Is the number of people that follow that and that they know so much about our life because of what my wife posts on there. We post on there for that reason so people can feel connected to us. But then I meet people that I don't know, and they're like, hey, how's Wyatt? Did he have fun at soccer camp? And I'm like, stalker? Like, what are you talking about? But people really feel connected. So it's easy to be connected more than ever before. But the problem is that we're actually connected, but we're not relationally connected. And there's a couple of factors that I think feed into this. And the first one is we have this thing called time poverty. Time poverty. That means that we're poor on time. We don't have as much time as we wish that we had. So where is it going? Something is stealing our time from us. We're just giving it away. We're misusing our time. But whether it's, work, I think nowadays work invades more and more of our lives because we have WhatsApp and we have email. Do you remember the days where, or maybe it's like this for you now, but where if you got a call from work after 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, it was like, I'm not answering that call. I used to have a work phone. And that work phone didn't go inside the house after work. And if they called the work phone, I didn't answer the work phone because I was not working anymore. But now with WhatsApp and with email and with the way that, the expectations on employees and things like that are now, there's much more of work that comes into the house with us, that follows us around on Saturdays, it follows us around on Sundays. It's there, it's hanging over our heads. And if it's not work, then it's these other things. Like we have our commute. We're about to move to the northern suburbs, and our commute is going to go from 3 minutes to 3 days, to get into. No, it's not going to be that bad. It's not going to be that bad. But we live in a city where traffic is a real thing, and we spend a lot of time in traffic, and that eats up some of our time. We struggle to pay the bills, so we create side hustles. We create other projects. We get other jobs. There's all these things that kind of come together that end up taking our time from us. And we end up at the end of the day or the end of the week or on a Saturday, we end up thinking, if only I had more time. I just ran out of time this week. So we're like poor on time. And what happens when we get, tired and we run out of time? We get exhausted. And what happens when you get exhausted, when you get tired, when you're overwhelmed, when you're overstimulated, when your nervous system is completely burned out? Well, we do this thing, which I think is kind of silly, but we self-isolate. So what happens when we self-isolate is we make our world small, because small is safe, and small is manageable, and small is good. So we bring our world down, and we make it as small as possible. And in doing that, what do? You start cutting things out. You say, I'll take this away, take that away, take this away. I'm not going to group. I'm not showing up to this thing. I'm not going out on Friday. I'm not... and what you end up doing is you end up bringing your world down to a very small world where the only thing that's actually still in your world is that job that you hate or that other thing that's draining you, because now you're not leaving the house to go do other stuff. But why do we do that? Why do we limit relationships? Well, we do it because we're tired and we're exhausted and we're trying to manage it. And self-isolation is the best way that we feel like we can make our world small. But when we do this, it prevents us from building the relationships that we need. In fact, when we get busy, when we get tired, and exhausted, friendship becomes an intention at best. Let me just read that for you again. When we get busy, tired, and exhausted, friendship becomes an intention at best. And then we say things like, we should catch up sometime, rather than letting friendship be a reoccurring practice. I love that line. Friendship becomes an intention at best. Because we intend to get together. We intend to pitch up. We intend to show up. But then we don't, because we're tired. But we lose out on those relationships. The other thing, other than time poverty, is our digital availability. So this is like how much access everyone has to you through your phone, and how much access you have to everybody else through your phone. How much access we have through social media. I mean, like I said before, when you are able to follow somebody and connect with somebody online to send a message or something, then you've connected. Why get a coffee when you can sit at home, in your underwear, on your chair, with chips and dip and the TV on, and do that and just like, comment, and subscribe. But we have so much availability through what's in our phones that because we have so much availability and the ability to reach and connect with other people, it prevents us from getting out and touching grass. Have you ever heard that saying? Get outside and touch grass? Yeah. It prevents us from doing that because then we spend all of our time online. And I haven't even addressed this other thing here, the damage of doom scrolling. Right? Who's a doom scroller? Everyone should raise their hand. I mean, you guys are all so there's 3 honest people in the room and everyone else is a liar, right? No. So we started a TikTok account, which Jamie up here is running for us. And yeah, it's great. I'm super excited about it. And I've been a YouTube Shorts guy, or YouTube is my preferred platform. Really like it. But something happened this last week with TikTok where it just kind of nailed my algorithm. And I this week for the first time I just disappeared for an hour. I lost an entire hour. It's so I'm a doom scroller. I could definitely get into this here. It's when you come home after a busy day, there's things that you could do, like cook dinner or go out with friends or build a relationship or something. But it's as you walk into your house, the phone comes out, and then the hands just, come here. And as the hands come up, you lay down. And then when you get in this position right here, the night's done. Doesn't mean you go to bed early. You go to bed at 2 a.m. because you've been, doom scrolling and watching the internet. But this doom scrolling thing, I know that if it takes up my time, it takes up everybody's time. And this is something that can really keep us from connecting and building relationships with others. The last thing that I read in this study on, the friendship recession is a fear of vulnerability. Being vulnerable is something that we don't like, we don't enjoy. What it requires vulnerability to build relationships with each other. But to ask somebody to be vulnerable, to confess, to talk, that's a tall order. And it's something a lot of us have a hard time just even getting over. But if we're never able to be vulnerable, maybe it's because we feel like we want to protect ourselves. We've been hurt by somebody in the past. We've been hurt by things in the past. We've been hurt and it hurts, and we don't forget those things. So we think, I got to protect. I can't be vulnerable. Have you ever, confessed something to somebody and then it backfired on you? And it's like, this is what I get for trying to be vulnerable, for reaching out and being vulnerable. It didn't work out. I'm not going to do that again. And that's a part of it. But we have to keep trying to pursue this. So if you're trying to protect yourself, and that's where your fear of vulnerability comes from, your efforts to protect yourself might actually be preventing yourself from the very thing that you need right now, a good friend. In 2021, there was a study that was done in the U.S., so this is probably a little more representative of Western society or Western culture. And in the study, 69% of people that were polled only had a situational friend. So not a close friend, not a confidant, not somebody that you can really go to, a situational friend. 69% of people only had a situational friend. Now, they asked a few more questions in this study, and 38% of men and 54% of women were likely to turn to a friend for support. So the women are doing better than the men, obviously. 54% compared to 38%, but that's still a failing number. That's not a good number. So 54% and 38% of us are likely to say, hey, I need a friend right now, I need some support. Those are small numbers. If you look at the inverse, there's a lot of people amongst us that don't have a friend. More than just a situational friend, somebody we can really depend on, somebody we can really count on. And that puts us kind of in this danger zone. And vulnerability, I get why we struggle with this. Vulnerability is scary because having a close friend requires that you take a risk. It requires that you admit when you're wrong. It requires that you admit when you're weak, that you ask for help. And then here's a tough one, that we make room for someone else's needs. That's what vulnerability asks of us. That's why it's scary. If we can't build these relationships, then, and we let our time poverty and our digital availability and our fear of vulnerability continue to kind of rule and run our lives here. My question for you, this is kind of the question for today's entire message here, is how are you going to fight your battles? How are you going to fight your battles when you're alone? Because it's just you against the world. Or you and your situational friends against the world. And what I mean by battles, let me clarify, is I've kind of broken this down into two groups of battles. So how are you going to fight the battles that are life battles? This is things like, the kids are always going to do something dumb. They're always going to get themselves in trouble. The car is always going to break down. The fridge is always going to break. Work is always going to be unfair. Someone else is always going to get the promotion. The moles are always going to come through your backyard, somehow missing all of your neighbors, come through your backyard right before you move and tear up all the grass. These are life battles. We don't want to fight these things alone. So how are you going to fight these battles if you don't have anybody fighting with you? If you don't have anybody there for you? And I can kind of answer this question here for you. It's like most of us think that we don't need somebody to help us fight these battles. We think we got it. I'm good. I'm good. I don't need you. I don't need your help. I can deal with these things. And if that's you, and that may be true for you, then hey, great. Fantastic. I'm not going to push on that. But let me take it one step deeper. And this is where I probably am going to get some of you or most of you here. How are you going to fight your secret inner battles when you're alone? You know that secret that you have that nobody else has or that nobody else knows? You know that thing in you that you kind of keep to yourself? You know that part of you that you keep hidden away and tucked away from friends, from a spouse, from other relationships? You know, everyone's got it. Everyone's got it. It's just a matter of whether or not you've dealt with it or not, or whether you've brought people into it. But everybody walks around and carries around these tiny little dark secrets. These things that we don't want to share with other people, the stuff that we don't want to talk about. Like we keep that stuff hidden. How are you going to fight that battle? How do you fight that when you're alone? You know, I'll never forget that a couple years ago, I stood up at a men's gathering and I begged a bunch of guys. I said, listen, if you're struggling with pornography, then we're going to run a pornography recovery course. And I just said, please, guys, please, if this is you, like, sign up anonymously, come. We did it at night on a Thursday. You came into the back entrance of the church so no one could see you. You know, he tried to make it as sensitive as possible here. But I know that there should have been 30 out of the 60 guys there should have come to it. But what was amazing is the guys that did come and did show up and did commit to an 8-week course ended up sticking with a 2-year-long small group, building these core relationships, and they found freedom. They found freedom because of the relationships that we formed together, because they weren't dealing with the secret inner battle by themselves. But when this thing stays a secret in you, now I think there's a term that I've created. I think it becomes this like inner dark spot on your heart. And I actually call this the inner dark. And this place, because you hold it as a secret, it festers and it festers and it grows and it grows. You know, how many addictions, they start out small and then they grow and it grows and it grows. And then you do it more and you do it more. And then all of a sudden this thing that you went somewhere to do, or this thing that you were participating in only at certain times, it begins to leak into more of your life. And these are those inner secrets. And those inner secrets become an inner dark, like a dark spot in our heart. And when it becomes that, this is something I want you to understand, that this is the place where strongholds are born from the secrets that we keep tucked away. Stronghold's something that's taken root that you can't really conquer. Strongholds are born from the secrets that we keep tucked away, leading to profound loneliness and battles we often cannot win. That's what happens when we keep secrets. That's what happens when we do life alone. When we think we can fight our battles alone. Or we think that we can fight our battles with God. You know, you may be sitting there thinking like, you dumb pastor, I've got God. I don't need other people. God's perfect. God's wonderful. I fight my battles with God alone. You know, we can talk after and we can argue that point, but Jesus and the 12 disciples in the Old Testament, there is more evidence in the Bible. There are so many verses that talk about confession to others. You know, you confess to God, you confess to others, because there's power in that. The power is not to humiliate you. The power is that you get to do this with somebody else. And God didn't design us to be alone. So I want to talk this morning about battles. And I want to look at a specific battle that we're going to study today. It's coming up. But first, I want to give you some context. Everybody say context. Oh, fantastic. So we're going to look at Israel here. Now, Israel, at the time of this story, Israel has been walking for 43 days and 580 kilometers. So they have left Egypt, Pharaoh has finally kind of let them go. Then Pharaoh tried to get them back, and Israel and Moses and Aaron and some others that are leading the people, they've left out of Egypt, and now they're headed to this place called the Promised Land. And so they're on a journey here. And so far up to this point, they've been walking for 43 days straight, and they've covered 580 kilometers. So I don't know the math exactly, but that's around like 8 or 9 kilometers a day, which is not very far, at all. Casey, my wife, just managing Wyatt covers probably 10 to 15 kilometers, a day. So 8 to 9 kilometers, but also you have to remember they had cattle, they had sheep, they had a lot of other stuff. They had mother-in-laws, they had old people, they had all kinds of stuff with them, all right, that was in tow. So things moved a little bit slower. But Israel's getting ready to come into this place. They're on their way to Mount Sinai. And while they're on their way there, they come into this valley. And when they enter into this valley, they enter into like a choke point because there's hills on either side of it. And so they come down into this choke point here. They've been walking for 43 days, and something tragic happens here. And when I read this, I got so mad. I don't know why I got so mad at this, but this made me just absolutely furious. In Exodus 17:8, it tells us what happened. Then Amalek and his people. Amalek was a guy that was actually a descendant from Abraham. He came from Esau. If you've ever heard of Jacob and Esau, they were twin brothers. Jacob's the one that grabbed his heel. Anyway, there's other stuff you can read about that. But the Amalek and his people came from Esau, so he's a descendant from Abraham. So Amalek and his people came, and they fought with Israel at Rephidim. So it doesn't sound very controversial, but I did research on this, and I went down. You can go back. Lauren, thank you. I did some research on this, and you can, here's what I found out, and this is why I got furious. The Amalekites came in, and they attacked Israel from behind. So they snuck up behind them because they were nomadic people. Now, likely the backstory is they probably weren't, because this is the desert, and water is scarce. They probably just didn't want to share their water with 500,000 people that were aimlessly wandering through the desert. So they thought, well, we're just going to go, wipe out the Israelites. We're going to attack them. So they come in and they attack from the back, which means that all the weak and the lonely and the lame and those that have been kind of like dragging back, those that were sick, those that were moving slower, all of those people were attacked from behind. And this just made me, I don't know why it made me so mad. It makes me mad now. It's like, Amalek and your people, you cowardly, just devious, horrible people for doing that, And I thought about it and I thought, but isn't that the way that attacks come in our lives? Rarely does an attack come from the front where we can see it and does it announce itself. Very rarely does an attack say, hey, Chris, today I'm going to make sure you sit in a lot of traffic so that you get super aggravated. And then when you come home tonight, your wife is going to do something with the best intentions. You're going to misinterpret it, and then you're going to yell at her. That's not the way attacks come so that we can get ready for it. No, attacks sneak up on us, and they come up behind us. Again, attacks aren't going to say like, hey, buddy, later your entire family's going to be gone unannounced for 2 hours. And you're going to have a quiet house to yourself. And you know what you can do in a quiet house as a guy or a lady. And then the only thing you can think about all day long is boobs. All right? Because that's the way porn works. But you don't ever get the warning. The warning doesn't come because it sneaks up from behind us. And it gets us when we're exhausted and when we're tired and when we're weak. And that's where the attack comes from. And that's why it makes sense that Amalek has attacked the Israelites from the rear. So they do this here. And Moses gets his team together. They're like, we got to come up with a plan. Because this is a bad deal here. It's a really bad deal. So Moses, he looks at Joshua. Joshua, this is the first time in the Bible that we're hearing about Joshua. Joshua would end up being the guy that would take over Israel, that would take Israel into the promised land after Moses, made a mistake and did some things without God. And so God said, Moses, you're not going to go there, but Joshua does go there. So Joshua is this amazing, faithful kind of assistant to Moses. And so Moses tells Joshua, he says, Joshua, now go back. He says, Joshua, choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. So he's like, Joshua, you the guy. You're going to go out, you're going to fight. And then Moses says, tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. Now, Joshua must have been super loyal, because if someone was like, Chris, you're going to go down there and fight with the sword, and I'm going to go stand up here on this hill and be spiritual. I'm like, no, you're not. You're going to come down here and be spiritual right next to me with another sword in your hand. But Joshua doesn't do that. All right? It sounds like Joshua's getting like an unfair deal. But Joshua doesn't do that. So Moses, he tells him, this is what you're going to do. Joshua says, okay, fine, I'll do that. And then Moses is saying, I'm going to go up on this hill and I'm going to stand with the staff of God in my hand. This staff of God was the one that he parted the Red Sea with. It was the one that he struck a rock and water came out of it, because Israelites, we're so thirsty. We don't have any water, and we would be better as slaves. And so God and Moses hit a rock. Water comes out of it. The Israelites have purified, amazing water. And it's that staff. So Moses is the appointed leader of the Israelites. God has asked him to lead them into the promised land. He's the leader, just like we are the leader of our families. We are the leader of our households. We are the leader of ourselves. And we need to lead ourselves well. Moses is the appointed leader. And Moses has the staff of God in his hand, which is saying that God is with Moses. That Moses knows that I can't do this without God, without the staff, without God. Just like us. Our staff maybe looks a little different, but we need God. And we need to hold God in hand, God in heart, to go with us and to go before us here. So Moses it says, this is what I'm going to do. Now the next day comes around. And in verse 10 we see this. When that next day comes around, so Joshua did as Moses said. So compliant Joshua here. He must have just been an amazing guy. And he fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur, they went up to the hilltop. Now when Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the hilltop, Moses took on a posture of prayer. So Moses went to the hilltop. We're going to see what he does with his arms here. But Moses didn't go alone. He took two people with him. Aaron was a high priest. He was the high priest that had been with Moses from the beginning. Aaron knew every weakness Moses had. He knew every fear Moses had. He knew Moses' strengths and his strong suits. He knew the calling that was on Moses' life. This was not a random guy that was like, you're going to hike with me today. This was his ride or die. And then Hur, the other guy that went with him, Hur was a trusted friend of Moses. In fact, Hur was so trusted that when Moses went up on the mountain to get the Ten Commandments, who did he put in charge with Aaron? It was Hur. Who do you put in charge when you have to step out? A guy that you know is going to get it done, that's going to do it well, and it's going to do it like you want it done. Someone that you can trust. A friend. A real relationship. So Moses takes these guys up on the hilltop, and when he goes up on the hilltop, he enters into a posture of prayer. And we see here in verse 11, so now when Moses held up his hand, you can go to the next slide. When Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And when he lowered his hand due to fatigue, Amalek prevailed. Okay, let's de-spiritualize this just a little bit. Can you imagine being Moses and you go up on the hill and the battle is down below and you take on a posture of prayer? And you raise your hands up to God and you raise the staff up to God. And you begin to pray over the battle that's going on. It's not too different than some of the battles we face. When you see your kids going through a tough time, when you see your kids struggling, you go to a posture of prayer to pray. When you see friends really struggling, you go to a posture of prayer and you pray, God, please help. God, be there for them. God, please help them. God, please bring them freedom. God, protect them. Keep them safe. You know, when we see battles, there are so many battles that we're either too old for, or we're too far away, or we're too far removed to fight ourselves. So we go to prayer. Even if you're not spiritual or Christ follower, when it really hits the fan, you think like, okay, God, I'm going to pray now. God, if you'll just do this, then I'll follow you. God, if you'll do this, I'll give my life to you. God, if you and I don't think that's disingenuous to God. I think God is like, I'm so glad you see it now. Let's talk about this. But we fight these battles this way. And Moses, so he goes up and he's holding his hands in the air. And as he holds his hands up in the air, Israel starts to prevail. So it's like, yeah, no, yeah. You know, I imagine like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, some kind of comedic sketch where as Moses' hands are up, he sees the tide is turning and the Israelites are beating the Amalekites. But your hands, you can only hold your hands up for so long. I thought about, as a sermon illustration, just having one random person stand here with their arms up the entire sermon. And just to see if we could count how many times they put their arms down, I thought. But the thing is I love you all too much to do that. If there was somebody I didn't like, I'd be like, I got a job for you, Joshua. Moses, he holds his hands up. But imagine the panic on Moses' face. Imagine. Because it's not like Moses knows. There's no indication that Moses knows beforehand. Winning, losing. Moses went into a posture of prayer. His arms got tired. As his arms fell down, he saw the battle turn. And when the battle started to turn, it was, okay, no, God, back in that posture of prayer. And then the battle started to turn for Israel. But his arms grow tired. And his arms go down and the battle starts to turn. Can you imagine the panic and the prayer that Moses starts to pray? God, I can't hold my arms up anymore. You got to help. God, please, I've given everything that I have and I can't do this anymore. God, I've done all that I know to do. I'm absolutely exhausted. God, my heart still hurts. I'm still watching injustice happen. I'm still watching my kids struggle or my work be unfair. Lord, there's all these battles in front of me, and I'm growing too tired to stay in a posture of prayer. Lord, but I'm trying, but I'm exhausted. That's what I could imagine Moses' prayer being. God, help. God, I can't do it. I can't hold my arms up. What am I going to do? And then at that moment, there's two ways the story can go. The way the story ends without relationships is Moses can't hold his hands up. His hands drop. And 43 days and 580 kilometers into their journey, Israel is annihilated and they're wiped off the map. But fortunately, as we learn that Aaron and Hur have gone with Moses, the story doesn't end without relationships, but it moves forward because of relationships. And we see in verse 12 that it says, but Moses' hands were heavy and he grew tired. So they first took a stone and put it under him and he sat on it. They put a stone under him and he sat down. What I found just so telling about this here is that, two guys went and dug up a stone that was big enough for Moses to sit down on. And why is this significant? Well, because a lot of times what we could see is that our friends can come in and our friends can help alleviate burdens that we don't need to carry. So they put a stone under Moses and he sat down. And when Moses sat down, it took off the unnecessary burden of Moses standing while his hands were in the air. Now, instead of Moses worrying about his whole body, all Moses had to worry about was from the shoulders up. So they brought rest to Moses. And something that we can learn about rest is, you can go to back one, is that rest comes before rescue. Rescue was going to come for Moses and for Israel. But the first thing that happened was rest. You know, our friends can come in, our relationships, they can come in and remove unnecessary burdens. They can come in and take those burdens off of us. And they can bring rest to us. You know, and again, I think about these things in a very practical way. So they brought this stone in and they put it under Moses. And then, you know, Moses is afraid to lower his hand, so Moses sits down. And, you know, and the buddies are like, you know, slap him on the back and be like, that's better, right? You doing good? Cool, right? You know? And as Moses' hands begin to fall, the Israelites still begin to lose. And so it's like, okay, well, that didn't fix the problem. It brought rest. But now the next thing that we need here is we need there to be a rescue. And so he sits on the rock, and they're figuring this thing out in real time. There's no indication that they know Moses has got to hold his arms up. But they've started to pick up the pattern here. And so in verse 12, it tells us that then Aaron and Hur, after they put the stone, so they put the stone, and then you have this word then, which means next. The next thing that happened was after the stone, Aaron and Hur held up his hands. So they're like, okay, I think there's something going on with the hands. You have one guy on one side holding one arm, and the other guy on the other side holding the other arm. You know, these guys, maybe they put the stone under Moses so that when they held his arms up, they just had to hold it like, you know, had an easier job of holding it. You know, relationships and good people bring wisdom that help us solve our problems. Wisdom that helps us to get through problems in a more rescued way. And so these guys, they hold his hands up. And his hands were steady until the sun set. That Moses held his arms up for between 6 and 8 hours. His arms were in the air with his two friends, Aaron and Hur. Now, again, I think about something in a really practical way. So follow me on this here. Moses is standing and his arms are in the air. And God is rescuing Israel like this. The battle is for Israel. When Moses drops his hands, when he drops them, the other team starts to win. So when Moses sits down, even when he's seated and his hands are in the air, they're still lower than they were when he was standing. And so what God is telling us about this here is that it wasn't about the position of Moses' hands. It was about his posture. And that it is a posture over position. Because it wasn't the position of how high Moses' hands were. That's why when he sat down, even sitting with his hands in the air, with the staff in the air, even in that position, they wouldn't have been as high as they were when he was standing. It's not about the position of the hands. It's about the posture of the heart. And it's about the posture of those that help you hold your arms up and that come around you and support you and fight your battles with you and fight your battles for you. God's more interested in our posture, this posture of prayer, this posture of surrender, than He is any position that we could hold or carry or take. You know, that brought me so much comfort because oftentimes we think, I've got to do in order for God to do. Or I've got to be in order for God to see me and in order for God to be. But that's not what this is. It's all about posture of your heart, which means you don't have to do anything except be surrendered to Him. You don't have to be anything except surrendered to Him. And that's the posture that God works with. Now, so this plan ended up working really well here, and Israel would go on to win this battle. In fact, in verse 13, we can just to close the story out. So Joshua overwhelmed and defeated Amalek and his people. He just annihilated them. He did it with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, and this is so important here, write this in the book as a memorial and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly wipe out the memory of Amalek and his people from under heaven. And this thing, the reason that you know this story and that we can teach this story today is because of this verse. When God told Moses to write it down. Because this is so important that this happened, and it's so important the way that this happened, and it's so important the lessons that are behind it, that Moses, I need you to write this down, and then I need you to recite it to Joshua, because Joshua represents the next generation. The next generation that's going to take over after Moses and lead the Israelites into the promised land. So when we fight these battles with others, when we bring relationships into our battles, it's not just for your sake. It's for the next generation's sake. This is legacy building stuff here. So my question for you is to close the sermon out here is, who is there to help hold up your arms? Who do you have to help hold up your arms? Yeah, Richie, I believe it, man. I believe it fully. Do you have an Aaron or a Hur in your life? Do you have somebody that'll come alongside? Do you have somebody that knows you intimately and deeply? And do you have that person? And I think for a lot of us, the answer is, probably no. I know in pastors, especially in lead pastors, the number of lead pastors that have a close relationship with somebody else, like a real close relationship, is like nil. Because we are the most broken, abused, beat up. We should get new jobs, Casey. We are just, the lead pastors are the most messed up people in the world. And so they have no friends because they've been hurt and they've been burned. You know what keeps Casey and I out of that boat? And we've been through hurt and we've been burned. What keeps us out of that boat is God, a relationship with God, and a continued relationship with others like you guys. What was one of the most, when we would have church home gatherings here, and we would have these gatherings, people would come over to the house, but the last place that we worked, the gatherings didn't bring us a lot of life and joy, because it was more like, getting a bunch of complainers in the room and then everyone saying like, why haven't you fixed my problem? And it just wasn't great, just didn't love it. And for the first long time, when we would have family gatherings for church homes, so people would come over to the house, I would just have this like anxiety that would build up in me. Be like, what's it going to be like? Is it going to be tough? Are people just going to, complain or point fingers, or like, we're just trying to have people over and do a social? And I would get so worked up over it because I had been trained and conditioned to do that. Now, I could have self-isolated and stayed in that place. And then I would have never known the love of so many of you. So instead, what we did is we had people over. And I just gritted my teeth. And it would usually take about 3 minutes. Yanita and Marlon and your family would come in. And you'd go sit outside at the table. And you were relaxed. You didn't, And they'd be like, how are you? Do you need anything? Can I get you anything? Does our house smell? Why are you sitting outside all the time? And it was like, are we okay here? And I'm just, panicking. But they were cool. And they were chill. And so many people like that retaught me how to accept the love of others. And retaught me how to lean on the love of others. And retaught me how good relationships truly are. And so when I ask myself this question, who's there to, you can go back, Lauren, who's there to hold up your arms? Well, the reason that we have people, to hold up our arms is because we've taken that risk, taken that chance. And it's the best chance that we could have ever taken, because our lives are so rich and so full. And part of the reason that I want to do this sermon series is because I hope that you can experience the richness and the fullness of life that we get to experience. And it's a big ask to say, who's there to hold up your arms? Because it's going to cost you something. It's going to cost something from you. You're going to have to give up some vulnerability. You're going to have to give up some transparency. And that's going to cost, and you're going to have to make a decision of, is that cost worth it or not? I feel like we made the decision, and yes, it's worth it. But then I'll just end with this last question. What if it costs you a lot? But then the next question is, like, but who cares if you win the battle? Who cares what it costs if you win the battle? You know, pay the price. Let's win battles together. I want to pray